Hello Astrobro subscribers, and welcome back to another video in the Exaltation and Debilitation series. If you're new to this, an astrological exaltation is a place in the zodiac belt, the ecliptic, where a subpersonality, which is represented by a planet, feels most comfortable in its particular place. So you can think of the astrology as the correspondence between above and below. So you're looking at planets with hopes that the correspondence between the planets and your internal state is relevant in your life, and using that to ascertain information in the future that would otherwise be inaccessible or very, very difficult to access. Today we're going to be talking about the exaltation and debilitation of Rahu, and this is going to be a little different than the previous videos in this series because Rahu is not a planet with clear exaltations and debilitations, same as Ketu, because for the other planets that are kind of only in one place at one time, it's very simple. Rahu and Ketu are like two sides of the same coin. They're always 180 degrees apart. So when you're looking at the exaltation and debilitation of other planets, they're always 180 degrees apart. Because Rahu and Ketu are not really a planet, they're more like an axis that goes from one side of the sky to another. There isn't a clear exaltation and debilitation point for them. And because of that, I'm using my own personal experience to sort of accentuate the places where I believe Rahu and Ketu are the most and least comfortable. So for this, we'll be talking about the exaltation and debilitation of Rahu. Rahu is an entity that is it's a lunar node. It's the northern lunar node. The lunar nodes are the places where the moon's orbit, which is an ellipse, is like an elongated circle. And you can think of the narrowest part of that circle, or that ellipse, as the axis of the lunar nodes. And the part that is northern facing is Rahu, and the part that is southern facing is Ketu. And in astrology, these points, these mathematical points, represent Rahu represents hunger, represents greed, it represents sort of unadulterated desire and desperation and anxiety, as well as illusions and tricks you play on yourself and others. So Rahu is considered a very immoral planet or entity. It is the part of us that doesn't necessarily follow society's rules because it's out for itself. It is basically hunger. Now, Rahu is not evil any more than a hungry person who steals a piece of food is evil. I would say that Rahu is immature and sort of disorganized, but that's actually not even true. I would say the immature part is true, but Rahu is incredibly organized. It is a schemer. It is a calculator. It wants what it wants, and it doesn't care what it has to do to get it, but that doesn't mean that the way it gets things is stupid. Rahu rules conspiracies, Ponzi schemes, scams. Its symbolism is a talking head or a skull with no body, the head of a snake, because snakes are very reptilian. They don't have higher ethics, really. They're just kind of like a feeding tube, and they're never satisfied. They're always hungry. So that's basically what Rahu represents. And the exaltation of Rahu is in Virgo, for very similar reasons to why Mercury and Pluto's exaltation point is in Virgo, because if you are paying attention to the similarities between these descriptions, Rahu is very similar in its nature to Mercury and Pluto, even though Rahu has some key differences with it. So Mercury is neutral information. It is science, facts, data, logic, all these things. That doesn't mean that Mercury is always right, but it does mean that it seeks to sort of articulate itself in the clearest possible way and to have reasons for what it believes, whereas another planet like the moon might not be as interested in having a logical debate. It might just tell you to piss off. So, because it's the mind, it's the emotions, it doesn't care about having an argument, it feels what it feels. But, Rahu is exalted in Virgo because of its Virgo is the sign of logic, facts, and reason, and arguments, and health, and all these things. And the supreme intelligence, the calculated immoral intelligence of Rahu, can express itself most fully in the sign of Virgo, in very much the same way that Pluto does. So And also, Rahu is a very materialistic planet. It deals with the material world. It is considered the god of the material world. So things like ego, food, music. In the Vedic tradition, they say that Rahu is a devotee of Venus. It bows and prays to Venus, and Venus is food and material pleasures. And Rahu is the thing that desperately seeks food and material pleasures. So, and also if you pay attention to the Venus video, Virgo is Venus's debilitation point. The reason for this is that Venus in its highest self is selfless love that can never be taken away. And Rahu is the most materialistic sign, and therefore the most conditional sign. The opposite of unconditional love is conditional love, so Venus is debilitated in Virgo. So that's why Rahu is exalted in Virgo, because it is the intelligence that wants you to have the big ego, the things that gratify your ego, the nice car, the nice house, the best food, all this stuff. It wants the best of everything because it's fundamentally insecure and materialistic. And so yeah, that's why Rahu is exalted in Virgo. Now, the debilitation point of Rahu, it has two. And I would say for Rahu and Ketu, the best way to understand their debilitation point is through conjunctions with other planets, as well as the exaltations and debilitation points that are just signs and houses. But for Rahu, I would say it has two debilitation points. One of them is whenever it's conjunct with Mars. And the reason for that is because when Rahu is conjunct Mars, it makes a person hyper-aggressive. And because Rahu, it sort of blows everything out of proportion where it is. It has this conniving, scheming intelligence that is very immoral and very direct and very A to B oriented and greedy and all these things, has a huge ego. And you can see that if you put that with the warrior planet, you can get some pretty bad results. I've known several people with this placement, the Rahu-Mars conjunction, who are in and out of jail chronically because they're always getting into fights. Like, somebody will look at them the wrong way in the street and they'll like start scheming and trying to take them out. And Rahu also represents the area in our last life that we were less than good at. We were what's it called? We were not very skilled in that area, and because of that we have insecurity, and that insecurity drives us in this life to pursue that path, that archetype. And if you have Rahu conjunct Mars, that means that you were very unskilled as a physical combatant, as a competitive person in your last life, and now you are effectively overcompensating for that in this life, and that can cause some pretty serious consequences. And I would say the other debilitation of Rahu is in the sign of Scorpio, because Scorpio is effectively a bottomless pit. It is the unknown, it is the occult, the hidden, the mysterious, the things that you must research. It represents detectives and research analysts and these kinds of people who are really interested in going into the darkest, deepest place of the mind or the world and trying to obtain its secrets. And Rahu is not very comfortable with this because Scorpio is the absence of materialism as well. If you really want to do effective research, you can't be focused on like your ego and gratifying your ego and pursuing materialistic goals, because that will get in the way of the truth. And Scorpio above all wants the truth. It is a seeker. So when Rahu is in Scorpio, it is not able to gratify its ego, and that makes it sort of this neutrally frustrated placement where they might have a bunch of knowledge. They will get a wealth of information, but that is not really satisfying to Rahu, because Rahu wants to indulge in the materialistic world. And Scorpio the sign of Scorpio placement does not let it do that. So that was my video on the exaltation and debilitation of Rahu. And next time I will be doing the exaltation and debilitation of Ketu. So tune in for that.